Hello, thanks for joining me. My name's Ed Cavett. This is the Broken News. Today is October 19th in the seventh circle of hell. That is the. Oops, I forgot to turn that down. The seventh circle of hell, that is the year of our Lord 2020. And I guess my stream is working. What are we talking about today, this week? We're going to look at the stimulus package, or lack thereof. We're going to take a look at who is in charge of the COVID response on the federal level. We're going to see how much this year looks like 1930. And we're going to talk about, of course, the man of the hour, President Trump. So our first thing. Got a lot of notes. So anybody who was following politics, who was watching how things were starting to line up at the end of June, realized that we weren't going to get any help until after the elections. That whenever you have something of value that both sides can attach to, then they'll use that as a political poker chip. They'll weaponize it in order to get what they want. And then the really clever thing about it for them, it's awful for us, but the clever thing about it for them is that it's hard to pin it down on anyone. Like, who do we blame? So you don't want to blame your side because your side's always right, or my side's always right. I want to blame the other side, and that's what happens. But really, both sides are to blame in this. Both sides are weaponizing the stimulus at the expense of people's lives and physical and mental health and well-being. The general welfare of people is at risk, while Nancy Pelosi, who claims to know what we're going through, acts like we don't, dying on hills that no one cares about. Just make a separate bill, help people, Main Street people, just help those people out, and if you've got anything else that you need to work it out on a separate bill. But they're not going to do that, because if you help people, then they're not going to focus on. They're not going to say, okay, you helped me out, I'll vote for you. That's not how they think people will act. How they think people will act is more like, oh, hey, Donnie. I know, right? Feel that way too. Or was that? Oh, yeah, if they help people out, then no one's going to really remember that. What they will remember is the bad thing. Who kept me from getting the help that I needed? So, the Democrats are going to blame the Republicans. The Republicans are going to blame the Democrats. And then whichever side you support, you're going to follow. You're going to go along with that and then blame the other side. But really, both sides are to blame. It's kind of unbelievable, and I'm not sure how they will feel this is going to work out. Maybe the American people are that dumb and won't see it. I hate to spell out the probabilities on that, but I'd like to think that people aren't going to care. They're not going to care. It's like, if nobody's going to give us help, you're all gone come November. So I feel like if you don't do something, it's going to cost you your job come November. I don't think people are going to be rallying around you, getting them kicked out of their home because you were dying on a hill that no one cared about. A hill that didn't need to be fought. I mean, that's a battle that doesn't need to be fought. So that's what we got with no stimulus. We're not going to get any help. What's the next thing? We have who's in charge of the COVID response. So I think on Meet the Press, What's His Nuts tried to get to the bottom of it, couldn't get anywhere. What he got was Trump is in charge and he has experts advising him. Okay, well, I watched a speech the other day where Trump couldn't even figure out what the name of it was. So I think his experts need to start with the name, and then maybe any other details they can kind of hammer out, and then maybe the Trump president can come to us with some valid information. But keep in mind, time is of the essence. And since we're already 7 months into this, you're kind of late for the party. So even if we did know who was in charge of the COVID response on the federal level in the executive branch, we can't take their word for it because they botched it so far. So you want to know who's in charge? No one. If you are looking for some leadership on how to respond or act with COVID-19, how we should be carrying ourselves, just look at Korea. Talk to the virologists in Korea. They'll let you know everything you need to know. You're not going to find it in your own country from your own leaders that you paid your own tax dollars for. You got to find it from somebody else on the other side of the planet. So that's where our leadership is. It's not here. Next, 2020. So leading up to the 1930, little history lesson, real quick. It's not going to be dry. It's actually going to be kind of interesting. In the 1920s, people had some money laying around. They decided they would invest it, and the upper echelons of the investor class cleaned them out, took all their money, left everyone broke. Nobody had a job, and if you did have a job, you were making way less. So this picture here, this is 15,000 people standing in line for 6 jobs. And while they're all standing in line, they're like, let's burn everyone's house. Let's go raid our leaders. Let's hang them in the streets. So in response to the threat of being hung and burnt out and having your head cut off, our leaders came up with a program like the food stamp program. That came out of the 30s. It didn't come out, the leaders didn't do this to help people. Let's put that out of our mind. They did this help to keep people from having a revolution, taking over the government again, throwing everyone out and starting over again. That's about where we were in the 1930s. We were really close to that. So as attrition, the power class capitulated. They formed the Federal Works Program, Food Stamp Program, Social Security. They improved the Veterans Administration. They had all these social programs that came out of the 1930s to help people. And those worked really well up until, well, I say worked really well, but food stamps, we'll talk about that here in just a second. But everything worked really well up until the war. And then once the war started, food stamps got axed because it was short everywhere. Food was short everywhere. It was being rationed. And there was no surplus to give poor people through the food stamps program. That's how it worked to begin with. If there was farmers were producing this food, no one can afford it, so the government bought it and gave it to poor people, and then that stabilized prices for farmers and producers and stuff. It doesn't work like that necessarily today. There's some things that are subsidized, but by and large, it's people get money, they buy goods, and if there's a surplus, great. If there isn't, then it doesn't matter. But that didn't happen until the 60s. So from like 1943 till the 60s, we really didn't have a food stamp program. In the late 40s, early into the 50s, the economy was doing really well because of post-war industry. So there wasn't the need for those welfare programs that there was in the 30s. So a lot of them got scrapped, and they never came back ever. Even though we saw just decline. Now would be a great time for the Federal Works Program. Now would be a great time for food stamps to be a little bit better. I mean, we've got people on food stamps and bread lines. That's where we're at now. So that's not really helping people. Also, another interesting thing out of the 1930s, you didn't have a lot of entertainment. You could watch the radio. I sound like Biden now. You could listen to the radio. You play cards or something. But board games were a big deal. Were just like the heyday of board games in the 1930s. And you want to know what the 2 popular board games were? Monopoly, ironically enough, because that's what led to the Great Depression. And then Sorry was the other one that was really popular. So that's interesting. It's not without a bit of irony, huh? So what's the point of this? Well, we're looking at the same sort of thing. So what happened at the end of the 1930s is, so if we're comparing 2020 to 1930, what do we have forward to look for in 2030? A raging world war. If the trend keeps continuing, there'll be a raging world war by the end of this decade, if not sooner. So if history repeats itself, where it certainly appears to be repeating itself, that's what we have to look forward to. And it's true, the World War II happened because of what's going on right now. Oligarchs ruining everyone's life, and then some political faction comes in and acts like they're going to do a better job, and they really make things worse and try to take over everything and so on. You know how it goes. So that's the 1930s. 2020. What's our next story here? Oh, God. I just wish this would go away. I am so worn out. Watching the rallies this week, I I still have a facial tick. Every time I see "Make America Great Again," I just I look around. 4 years. I didn't think you could get things this bad in 4 years. Honestly, it's like it's going to take you a while to make things now. Horrible, absolutely horrible. So the reason why I bring up this here is because of uh, Governor Whitmer from Michigan. She's a Democrat. She's in a key state, kind of a pivotal state. Now, I'll explain real briefly what's going to happen this November, what three cases could play out that's going to tip it toward Trump. In all three cases, you have North Carolina. If Trump can't get North Carolina, none of those three cases work. In two of those cases, he has to get Michigan, or they don't work. And in two other cases, he has to get Arizona, or it doesn't work. So everything is contingent on multiple cases all aligning. So Michigan is a real important one. It was pivotal in 2016 because there was a Democratic base that flipped. And now Trump going after Whitmer, it taints the Democratic well, and it cements his base around the Republican ticket. That's at least the theory that I think he's following. What he doesn't realize is that that's not the only factor that's influencing Democrats voting for Republicans in 2016. There were a lot of problems, and if those problems aren't solved, then there's no payoff for a 2020 return to the vote on in 2016. So you could easily lose that base, and it looks like he is. So one of the things he does is he hammers at the Democratic leader in Michigan, which is their governor, keeps hammering at her and hammering at her. First of all, she's a woman. We know that Trump is a misogynistic piece of shit, so he's going to go after her just because of her gender alone. She's in that swing state, so she gets the focus. He's not going after California's governor because it's not going to do him any good. He doesn't have a base there. So he just leaves all the other governors who are doing the same thing as Whitmer aren't getting the criticism from Trump that Whitmer is getting, to the extent to which people are stalking her and threatening to kidnap her and execute her. So focusing on her so that he can get that vote, so that he can steal up at least two of those different cases to win, that's what he's doing. It seems really obvious to me. I hope the people in Michigan can see that. I mean, I understand exactly why they voted for Trump in 2016, and I don't blame them for that. I honestly don't. They know what the legacy of the Clintons had been, and they knew that Hillary was just not an option, so they took the lesser of two evils as far as they saw it. But if there's no payoff at the end, they're not going to keep riding that train. And Trump's desperate to keep that swing state. He's really desperate. So that's what we're seeing there. That's why we have so much vitriol from the president toward the governor, to the point where it's threatening her life. And the president just has an axe to grind against the Democratic Party. I have an axe to grind, so I can't fault him for that. But I mean, you gotta be fair about it. I mean, if you've got a criticism, then let the criticism be fair. But let's kind of keep it civil. Let's not put other people's lives at risk with our inflammatory rhetoric. So that's kind of what we have. Yeah, it is. It is sad, Donnie. I agree. What was some other news? Amy Coney Barrett. That's just a weird name to say. I don't want to say Coney. I don't feel like it should be a name. It's like a place or a hot dog. She's pretty much going to be the Associate Supreme Court Justice. And there was some pandering, some sycophantic, the most pedantic shit you ever seen in your life was on Fox News. So you have somebody whose career is dedicated to getting people like Amy Coney Barrett elected to these federal court positions and the Supreme Court. That's his job. He runs a website. He runs an organization dedicated to that. I hope they're not out here getting ready to lawn mow while I'm trying to record. That would be awful. Okay, well, let me move through this really fast. They were on there talking about how great she was, and Fox News is supposed to be balanced, fair, balanced, and impartial. Well, why are you having somebody whose job it is to support her giving a critique about how well the hearings went? That was just blatant propaganda. That couldn't have been any more obvious. And people took shots at me for calling it out. I called it out as bullshit, and they kissed their ass. And I don't know what to say about that. I honestly don't know what to say. But I took some. People called me shit for brains. That's fine. You can call me whatever you want. What's another thing? Michael Reinhold. He was the presumed to be Antifa member who was executed by the police at the tacit request of the president. Now, he didn't come right out and say, "Hey, hunt the guy down and kill him," but he may as well have, because that's the effect. Michael Reinhold, that could be any one of us who criticizes the power class, who criticizes authority, who criticizes the president. That's what you have in America. You have the opportunity to be gunned down. So that's an ugly thing. That shouldn't be happening. Nobody's really talking about it. They talk about the guy from Kenosha all the time like he's some kind of hero. I just don't get it. I think that's the trash. I'm sorry if you guys... Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Sometimes they come real early and I'll be asleep and I'll hear that and I'll wake up stabbing the air. I'm punching and stabbing whatever is causing it. This is what you get when you pay half of your monthly wages to rent. This is what you get. This is the kind of peace and quiet and sanctity in your own home. That's what you get in America. Poor people get shit on all the time, and I get shit on every single day, and I just have to deal with it. And I don't usually complain about that stuff, but since it's happening in the middle of my live stream, I might as well. Let's see. I got the Supreme Court, I got the Michael, I got the Fox News. Fan mail. I talked about that a little bit. The comments on my videos. I get some pretty crappy comments. A lot of times it's just directed at whatever the video is. That's fine. Sometimes it's directed at me, like I don't know what I'm talking about. Hey, maybe sometimes I don't completely know what I'm talking about. Does anyone else? I haven't seen any example of anyone really talking about the truth or giving you any kind of valued perspective other than the narrative that somebody who doesn't care about you wants to shove down your throat. So that's just all I'm trying to offer. If you disagree, if you strongly disagree enough to call me shit brains or whatever it is, if you feel that way about it, here, I'm going to invite you to start your own channel and discuss things the way that you see them. That's your right. I don't go to your channel, take a shit on you. Don't come to my channel and take a shit on me. I mean, if you want to, you can, but expect that I will come back at you. I will definitely come back at you. So I'm welcome to an open discussion. I do post and am respectful of opinions that I do not share. But one thing I'm not going to take is an attack on my character as a way to undermine my assertions. That's an ad hominem attack. It's one of the most basic, childish forms of rhetoric that people use, and I'm just not going to go. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to have that. So your comment, you'll get hidden. Your comment will be deleted. If it's not deleted, I will reply and I will scorch you in it, and you'll wish it was deleted. And if you post a comment and delete it, there's a good chance that I will see it before it goes away. So you better make sure it's a good one, because I will quote you on it. Thanks for your submission. You're not going to post garbage and then turn around and delete it 5 seconds later because you realized you were wrong and think you're going to get by with it. You should have thought about it before you posted it, basically. I've done that. I've posted stuff and been like, ooh, I'm going to delete that. It wasn't a good idea. I should have thought about that before. But you know what I do next time? I think about it more. So there's a good chance I could save your comment. So keep them coming. I guess that's it for the news, pretty much. I've discussed, I guess, all I've needed. That's pretty much all that's going on. Just nothing but a bunch of crap and garbage. The protests have gotten a little bit easier. They're smaller. It seems like people are staying away. I don't know if the weather's getting colder and they're not into it as much, or A lot of them have been arrested and court ordered barred from showing up at the protests. A lot of them have been arrested and now they're locked up in jail. Some of the more violent rioters and stuff like that. So all you have left is just your basic regular protesters, and that number is a little bit smaller than what the original crowds were. I think if people were getting somewhere, they would be more, it'd be more enthusiastic still, but it doesn't seem like it's getting anywhere. So people must be sitting home working on plan B. Well, that's a broken news for October 19th, 2020, and the few days before then. I'm your host, Ed Cavett. Thanks for joining me. If you like this, give me a thumbs up, hit the bell, hit the subscribe, and if you don't like this, give me a thumbs down. Let me know if it's a valid criticism. I'll be right there with you, even if I don't agree with it, even if there's things in it that I think are opinion-ish and I don't agree with. I will leave that comment up there. I have before. You can check out my videos, look at the comments. You can see I leave all kinds of comments on there. The ones that I erase are lies, they're attacks, they're calling for violence. Those are gone. Those are not going to stay on my channel. So if you can keep it out of that realm, I welcome your comments. Please let me know. Give me another side of it, maybe that I'm not seeing. I can't see everything. I don't know everything. And the only way I'm going to find out is if somebody lets me know. So please let me know if you think something that I said was wrong. I'll make a correction if you can convince me, if you give me some evidence. That I'm not hard to convince. All I take is evidence. I know that I'm not always right because the evidence I get isn't always the best or isn't right. So set the record straight, please. Until next time, you guys.